because this might be the inner chronicle of what we are, and we have to articulate ourselves, otherwise we would be cows in a field.
Welcome to Cows in the Field. This is a show in which we discuss philosophical themes in popular films. My name is Justin.
I'm Laura.
And today we're discussing Denis Villeneuve's Dune Part 2. Returning to the show today, we have John DeVore. John is a writer living in New York, creator of Humongous on Medium, and most recently the author of forthcoming book, Theater Kids, A True Tale of Off Broadway. We'll come back to that at the end of the episode. John can tell us all about it. Welcome back to the show, John.
Cannot wait to talk more about my upcoming book, hits bookstores June 18th, Theater Kids.
Yes. But today...
I'm practicing.
Yes, exactly. Good. But today we're here to talk about Dune Part 2, Denis Villeneuve's sequel
Can't wait.
to the 2021 film Dune. And this movie has been doing well. It's made about 180 million worldwide as of this record. But here's the thing. There's been a lot of critical takes. But everyone, and let me say everyone, has been waiting anxiously for one man's opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And that man is the resident spice head of the world of film Twitter, John DeVore. John, tell us
God, I love that. You're so nice.
overall verdict on Dune 2.
You know, it's funny you should mention, I don't think that there's enough spice in Denis Villeneuve's
Villeneuve.
You know, So look, I never liked the dividing of the book and the movie into two halves. We might have mentioned this the first time. I think all of the best stuff happens in the first half. I think it's very hard dramatically to beat the betrayal and fall of House Atreides. Oscar Isaac did such a good job, I think, of being warm and giving a real heart to the movie. Dune 2 looks great. It is beautiful. It is, it is political in a way that is true to the book, but different in many ways. How do we pronounce his name? Now you've made me
want
to pronounce
Denis Villeneuve.
No. Do it right.
Denis Villeneuve. He's French Canadian. Villeneuve.
I just see it's a testament. I don't talk to people.
Just call him Denny V.
Denny V.
Denny V.
Yeah.
Denny V clearly is. He in his adaptation of the book, he's removing things, which I think is interesting, and he emphasizes. Look, he had a very definite view, and it was very clear. The movie swims. It's long, but it never really drags. I think the world building is a little weaker than in the first half. I know that we're going to talk about this, but I can't help but compare it to Lynch's Dune, obviously, and how Dune. Look, it's a weird book. It's a great book. It's a book that. As pioneering mid-century sci-fi novels go, I think his critique of the West, I think his philosophy, his politics were more, contemporary, more on the right side of history, for lack of a better term, than his contemporaries in some ways, and Asimov or Heinlein or, anyway, yeah, it is a stunning looking movie. I think because I saw Lawrence of Arabia for the first time recently on the big screen, that movie was with me, which is a movie about, amongst many things, it's about how your political heroes are not who you think they are.
Yep.
So I think there was a little bit of that in Dune too.
Yep.
But yeah, I just don't. And I didn't love. I know what happens in Dune Messiah. I don't think it's. I think he referred to this, or someone referred to this movie as Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah, it's been
but
going around.
Dune Part 1 is Empire Strikes Back because Empire Strikes Back
it ends with the
right.
Yes, I agree.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think he might do a little disservice setting up.
Yeah, I mean, Dune Messiah is also a downer movie. I mean, book. It's basically going to end down. It's all these books end down. I mean, all these movies are going to end down.
One interesting thing that he did in Dune 2 was he de-emphasizes Paul's superpowers. He leaves this question up in the air as to whether or not Paul is the chosen one or not, or is merely this is a political fiction that a role that he's right. In the books, I think you get a better idea, and in Lynch's movie, that Paul is this Kwisatz Haderach. This is a superpowered being, and in that way, I think Herbert is. I think Alan Moore, to bring someone up randomly, his doctor, his Watchmen is in conversation with Dune in one way, and that is a superpowered being would become alienated from humanity and would probably do awful things. So and that's what Paul. That's his tragedy. That's eventually what he does. He wages the holy war. Spoiler alert: he becomes a bad. Superman would become a bad guy. Dr. Manhattan is okay. A superpowered human would be okay with doing terrible things to humans.
I totally agree. Okay, so we're going to come back to a bunch of these points. This is opening remarks, but I just want to hear, before I touch on that, Laura, do you want to say anything, opening, remark, kind of, foray into this conversation about Dune 2?
I did not prepare remarks in that way.
But what's your initial overall verdict?
I liked Dune 2 more than Dune 1. Still love Dune Lynch the best. That's
your opening remark.
That's it.
Okay.
I mean, she's correct though. It's remarkable that her opening remark is so
yeah.
So
you
perfect.
Succinct. I do disagree. I think Dune 1 over Dune 2, and I like Lynch's Dune overall. But I will say, to pick up on one of the points that John was putting down, by foregrounding the political divisions within the Fremen and making the prophecy a kind of, maybe it's a political myth, maybe he really isn't the Kwisatz Haderach, and then backgrounding his sort of superpowers, I think it's fine. It works to create some degree of tension where these books and David Lynch's film have, in some ways, very little tension, because there's this kind of inevitability. Once these guys gain prescience, they see their future and they're just like, cool, now I'll just act out the future. But I think the problem, though, with that is that it creates a narrative tension inside of what's going on, because the actual plot of the book and the film is that Paul is the Kwisatz Haderach. He does become the supreme being. He makes the choice, and it's a choice between two bets. And he's trying to, I think Villeneuve is trying through Chani. We need to talk a lot about Chani because she's a major character in Dune 2. I think he's trying to set up a counterpoint to Paul. But the problem, and it's great that, he gives Chani this role, because that's not a role she plays in the book, and not in Lynch's Dune either. But the problem is that, in my view, we could talk about this, but in my view, she's just wrong. Paul has prescience, and he sees the future, and he has to choose between A and B. Both are bad, but he chooses A, which is the, jihad and billions die. But B was the continued subjugation of the Fremen, and the Emperor stays in power, and the Harkonnen stay in power, and all that stuff. So he's choosing what he sees as the lesser of two evils. She does not have prescience. So she's upset about this, but it's like, I feel like it's hard to, anyway, I don't find that as compelling as I think Villeneuve wants us to. So anyway, that's, point. Hear the counterpoint. Let's hear the counterpoint.
No, Lawrence of Arabia is one movie. Again, I don't know when's the last time you saw it. I blew my mind. I had just never seen it. Another movie that Dune 2 brought up for me was the classic musical, one of my favorite musicals, Jesus Christ Superstar. I don't expect either of you to know anything about
I've
it.
not seen it.
I saw a high school
Okay.
production because my boyfriend was in it. So
Tell us, John.
That's a good reason to see it. Okay, well, in a nutshell, the musical is the Christ story from the point of view of Judas. And in the musical, Judas is a guy who just doesn't believe Jesus is the Son of God and is a practical political activist and is critiquing Jesus, basically singing songs that are like, "You're not the Son of God.
This
We're
is
just a bunch of
yeah.
right." And that is the viewpoint. And at the time, the musical was controversial simply because of that portrayal of Judas the betrayer as someone who loves the Messiah, but doesn't think he is magical. And that is Chani. She at this point she could betray Paul because she doesn't believe he is this. He was with his political mission until it changed. The movie is strictly political in that there's very little evidence that the prescience, that the hallucinations, that any of that stuff is, look, the world of Dune, there are humans and then there are mutant humans. And a lot of them can see the future either in time travel or the Bene Gesserits or the Mentats. Everyone's using drugs. There's no computers. A lot of that is not in Dune 2 at all. So I think he is choosing that this is political. That Paul is not seeing the future and that he is following his mother's script.
Yeah, I see that. I think that's interesting. I mean, I think that would be a really radical departure, though, from the book, and I think also
100%. Yeah,
yeah, and I think that's why I'm not totally sure that. I mean, I grant that it's backgrounded. I totally grant his superpowers are backgrounded for sure. But I think that. So there's something that happens in the movie towards, I don't know, it's like right after he takes the water of life. This is what we're debating is like, what happens when he takes the water of life?
Right.
Does he now, like, what is that change? And is the movie do enough to justify the read that he is actually now just carrying out an evil plan that's been put in place that beyond him? Or is he exercising agency? He's now seen something. He's now choosing, okay, I just have to choose this. Or has he become like, in a way, corrupted? And my read on it was that he does see the future. I mean, that's the read in the book. And he's making these choices. So he's a tragic hero. He's not a villain. He's a tragic hero. And he's a villain insofar as he has unchecked power.
Yeah, okay.
But he's not like he's not Baron Harkonnen, right?
No, but he's not tragic because I think tragedy requires a choice and then being able to regret that choice. And if he can see the future, he isn't making a choice.
Well, he sees what I mean, we have to think about what he means.
I mean,
he sees the future.
The water of life, it just seems like he had a bad ayahuasca trip. And that's just, I'm serious. Yeah. Like it wasn't, I agree. He really doesn't emphasize it,
I agree. No, I totally agree that Denis has really pushed this in the background. Yeah. So it opens up space for your read. I totally agree.
For somebody who hasn't read the books, watching this movie, you might just get the read where you're like, well, water of life turns you into a homicidal maniac.
That might be, yeah.
Because at some point he's like, when they first go into the siege, when they first get adopted by the Fremen and the Fremen are glaring at them, Paul says something like, all right, we got to get these Harkonnens back.
Yeah.
They fucked up my life. And Jessica says, your father didn't believe in revenge. She drinks the water of life and she's like, who are the most vulnerable? Let's we got
to convince them. Yeah.
We need to convince them. We got to get them. Like she sounds like she basically starts acting evil as soon as she takes the water of life.
That's true.
And then Paul's like, I'd like to be a nice guy. I'd like to hang out with Chani. Drinks the water of life. And he's like, I am the Grizzlies Hatterack. And he's trying to launch atomics at everybody. I'm just saying.
Now that I think about it too, with the in the book, obviously his sister, I forget the name.
Alia.
Saint Alia of
the
Arnaish.
Abomination.
Our favorite character.
Right. In the book and in the book and in Dune, she's born, her growth accelerates, and she kills the Baron. She's this she's another piece of magical evidence. But in the movie, since Jessica's the only one who can hear her, it could be psychosis.
Yeah. That is really interesting. I had not.
There's no outward evidence.
Yeah.
There's nothing that she does. She could, Jessica just could have had a crack with reality and is talking to herself.
Yeah, no, it could be that you're right. The water of life
poison.
is a hallucinogen and it makes you a religious zealot. Totally. But here's one piece of evidence against that. He has a very successful attack against the Emperor and the Baron, which he seems to attribute to his ability to foresee the path, right? He says what he sees when he sees the future is he sees all these different futures, and then he says, okay, this one leads to us all dying, this one leads to them winning, but there's a narrow path. He talks about the narrow path, and it seems like he sort of sees how he can. And part of it is like, we have to do this attack in this way, and it does succeed. So that is some evidence that he is successful. Now he could have just got lucky.
I mean, but the narrow path is nuclear missiles and 3 worms.
It's got those worms.
They were like for years we were only going to do 2 worms.
That's right. That's right.
But then Muad'Dib. Blesses his name. He said 3.
Yes, that's right. The voice from the outer world.
It's true. It did. I guess you're right. He does have some desert power. It kind of felt like he's like, I love desert power. Gonna be Fremen, learn all your ways. And then he's like, hold up. I have atomics. I don't need desert power anymore.
It will be quite.
My plan is bombing.
I mean, here's the thing. If you read the movie the way you guys are suggesting, then Paul is he's become corrupted in a way. Like, corrupted not in the sense of like, I've got so much power now I want to just do whatever I want, but he's literally just become evil, and he's acting out.
Well, look, you brought it. It's tragic, so it could be. There was a point in that movie, I forget the line where. You just mentioned about how his father wasn't a vengeful person, but like Paul could be. Vengeance is a classic tragic
definitely
flaw,
driven by vengeance. Yes.
Right. Yeah. And so, he maybe, again, part of his tragedy is that he is not his father.
Yeah.
And that, that to me would be tragic. He can't be tragic if he has no choice. If he is super,
Well, yes, that's why I think, no, you're totally right. That he doesn't like see the way. The future seeing has to be like he sees options, but he's just really good at seeing like the consequences of those options, so he can like play out a game of chess. He's playing out lots of games of chess, and he's just like, this is the path, rather than he sees the single future laid ahead of him. And in fact, actually, I was rereading parts of the book. So in the book, they make it very clear that Paul sees only parts of the future. There's actually parts of the future that are black, basically. They're blacked out. So in some of the futures, he sees himself dead, but he doesn't see how he dies. It's stuff like that. So he's got a kind of limited but much more extensive prescience than the worms, the Space Guild people and the Mentats and the Bene Gesserit and all that. But there's black, empty spots in there. And I think anyway, but the reason I think it's tragic is it's like he kind of looked out. It's like when you're presented with, you just by circumstance presented with 2 choices, and they're both bad, and you're like, damn it, that sucks. That's tragic, because you're like, well, I got to go one of these 2 ways. They're both bad, and I have to be the one who makes that choice. And
so Chani represents the other choice.
Yes,
and that other choice is also the path of love.
Yeah.
And he doesn't. He does. No, he is. And we can think about what his motivations are about becoming emperor.
Yeah.
And so Denny V, I think, has set up a kind of a more, sort of Shakespearean sort of like a bummer. And in that way, I love the bummerness of Dune Messiah. I love that Frank Herbert says a white Superman savior creature would be a monster.
Yes, it would be in some ways as bad as the situation that we found ourselves in. Because we have to remember, what's the alternative? The alternative was a kind of loose coalition, pseudo-democratic coalition of a bunch of, kind of self-centered aristocrats, right? That's what we had. Emperor at the top, Corrinos, and then you have the Atreides and the Harkonnens kind of all battling a little bit here and there, and ultimately exploiting the Fremen. and Arrakis. That's the alternative. So the flip is, okay, you've got a liberated Fremen, but unfortunately now at the top you've got this kind of god-like emperor who now has total control over the most valuable resource in the entire galaxy. So this is another point, actually, we should talk about how the film has really backgrounded, I think, one of the most important economic factors in this, which is the role of the spice in the universe. But anyway, he has control of the most valuable resource, and he's effectively threatening. He can keep everyone in line by threatening to destroy it. And that's like the crucial thing, and it's in the Villeneuve movie for sure, but it's much, it's not really in the Lynch movie that much either, but it's really in the book. Like at various points at the end of the book, the Spacing Guild are like, you would destroy the spice? Do you understand like what that would do to the people like yourself who are addicted to it? Like they're basically like, because all these people are addicted, the Bene Gesserit, the Mentats, the Spacing Guild. If they don't get the spice, they're going to have like, I don't know, they're probably going to die and really horrible deaths. And so they're all concerned about that. Not only that, but also what this would do to the planet. So all the economy is driven by the fact that the Spacing Guild allows you to flip around from planet to planet. No spice means you don't have any you don't have any
Universal
interstellar economy.
Yeah.
You just don't. Like
I
everyone is
mean,
isolated.
the what do you call it? The metaphor is the metaphor is simplistic, right? It is obviously oil. And I also think, though, in our political conversations, as much as America's foreign policy is loathsome and single-minded, and if oil were to cease pumping right now, our entire system would fucking spin into chaos as everything stops. It's a crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And I think Herbert even saw that then.
Oh yeah.
And he's also writing too at a time of colonial upheaval with, England and France specifically fighting and losing and letting go of their colonies. It's just it's a fascinating story.
Yeah, totally. So to Villeneuve's credit, the very first line of the film is "Power over spice is power over all," which is translated, right? This comes before the credits. I kind of like that. I like when he does these.
I like it too.
Yeah, it's really cool. Of course, it's not as cool as Lynch's "He who controls the spice controls the universe," but I like that it's in this weird language that we don't know. So another, dimension of the kind of anti-hero sentiment of the Paul thing is, and Villeneuve has come out as explicitly like anti-Marvel. Right, he said this explicitly. He got some flack for this, like being like, "Oh, the Marvel movies, like they all kind of look the same, and they, it's like this, whatever. They're all this sort of samey thing." But his movie is very much an anti-Marvel movie in the sense that we're just talking about.
I mean, that's why I go back to Watchmen. I love,
exactly,
which is the peak. I love superheroes. Sure, it's a very limited genre, and I think that Watchmen is the peak of commentary on it. And and Moore's commentary is simple, and that is superheroes are a belief in violence. They're fascist, and and I think Denny V's. I think Herbert's worldview was like is that as well.
We shouldn't aim to have localized all the power in one person. That's bad. It's like generally a bad thing. And when you have unchecked power like this, it's really dangerous. By the way, just on this point, the New York Times has been running a series about nuclear power because they're trying to make the case, through various opinion columns that like
50-50 we all die.
Well, no, that actually the system we currently have set up where in the United States the president has sole authority to launch nukes is insane. And
it's insane.
And like he does not have sole authority to start war, but he has sole authority to launch nukes.
Right.
And that's in part because apparently he has 15 minutes from the time we know when nukes have been launched to make a decision, which is crazy. I mean, anyway, so we're living in a situation where a single individual has the power. A single individual has the power to destroy the world.
I mean, but that was the Cold War.
Exactly. Yes. No, totally. Which, of course, Herbert is writing in that period of time, too.
Absolutely.
To the superheroes' credit, I do think that Marvel did discuss this in the movie Captain America Civil War, which genuinely the conflict of that film is, should there be a kind of check on the Avengers, right? Should they be subject to non-superhero oversight? And I like, it's there. It's like, and that's a movie that among the like Marvel fans, like I think a lot of them don't like that much, but I kind of dig, in part because, it doesn't deal with it very substantively, but it at least is asking those questions. But you're totally right. The instance of this is Watchmen. That's the case. That's the real like place of all this. But I do think like Marvel has grappled with it in a kind of superficial way.
And look, I love superhero movies also. It's just it's not a nourishing genre.
Hot take, John.
But like, I love glazed donuts. They're
yes,
delicious.
exactly. You can't subsist entirely on them though.
Well.
Okay, so what did you guys think of Stilgar? So Stilgar, he's not really in the first movie, but he has a pretty substantial role in this film, and Javier Bardem is bringing a lot to the character. What did you think of
so fun.
John?
Look, Javier Bardem, I think, is the MVP of Dune 2,
For
followed
sure.
by Zendaya. He's the MVP because he brings humor. Like I don't really love Denny V's sort of pan-racial, ersatz Muslim sort of. I didn't. There was something about it that felt not well built in terms of this futuristic religious society. But Javier brings humor, and most importantly, he brings what I think is probably the most important scene in the movie, and that is during the big leadership conference. You begin to see him go from a political creature planting lies and lobbying for Paul, and you see him turn into a true believer. He, when he's like, fight me and replace me and kill me and become the leader, and he falls to his knees as Paul is beginning to preach, and you see in Javier Bardem's face he has this look of devotion to Paul, and that's a very important part of the movie to see that switch go off. And Javier does an incredible job with kind of an underwritten sort of, noble, savage, wise man, Obi-Wan Kenobi kind of role. He's wonderful in the film.
Totally. That is in the book. So Paul talks about how Stilgar has become, he went from a friend to a worshiper. He does talk about that. That's not present in Lynch's Dune at all, really.
No.
Basically, as soon as he meets Stilgar, Stilgar is like, all right, cool. You're our best friend.
But he doesn't just become a friend into a worshiper. He is a lobbyist. He is a political ally of Paul, and then he becomes a worshiper. Then he believes in the prophecy.
Yeah. Laura, were you pro Stilgar?
Yeah. Obvious. No, I thought he was so funny. I also really like those noises that he makes.
Weird mouth noises.
Yeah, like I don't know what
Signals.
like I do kind of like that element of the world building of this place, is that everybody's got their own languages. They're all code switching in terms of like which language they're using with one another. The Atreides have hand signals. I don't think it's ASL. Is it sign language or is it?
They have some sign language. It's like battle sign language.
Battle sign language that they're using. So we're actually constantly seeing subtitles to try and, as people are speaking in different ways to one another. And we never really know what the Fremen's like codes are, but they make these sounds that are like wildlife sounds. Because they're badass.
I also love his, like when he's advising Paul, when Paul goes into his sojourn into the desert and he's telling him about the various creatures.
The little caterpillar.
Yeah.
And the big caterpillar.
And you don't need to worry about the big ones. Yeah, the djinn. Don't listen to the djinn. But that's the thing, though. Listen, if you're going to do a totally secular reading of this, or not a secular reading, but a not Cuisart's Hatterack reading of this, did Paul just like listen to a djinn? When he was like, he's like, I won't go south. I won't do it. And then he just kind of looks into the distance. He touches some sand. He gets a little spice, and he listens to a djinn, aka the guy he killed that one time. And then he's like, I'm drinking the water of life. Fuck it, I'm doing it. Like, because he listened to his djinn. Don't do it. They're gonna tell you to do things.
That's true. Well, it is. I mean, that is cool too, because it's kind of one of those things that happens right when you go into the desert and you're like deprived of water and you start hallucinating, and then the jinns come out. It's a real deal.
Yeah, but I also like that Johnny was like, I need to go help him because Stilgar's a lunatic.
Yeah,
and it's just like
he's probably gonna die.
Off you go.
But she goes out and helps him, and that corrupts the prophecy.
Right. Because he should have been able to do it on his own.
100%.
Yeah.
So that is something that corrupts the prophecy. It wasn't he goes off into the desert and is helped by Chani.
By desert spring tears.
Well, yeah. Okay, so Stilgar, good. We're pro Stilgar.
Oh yeah, pro Stilgar.
Right.
Love Stilgar.
Okay, so Jessica though, because Jessica has an interesting turn. She goes from being a kind of a complicated, conflicted character from the first film, showing a lot of vulnerability, to being this raving lunatic post Water of Life.
Yeah.
Talking to her unborn child, which is some of my favorite sequences in the film. She's just like walking around talking to her baby, partly because that's a very real thing. Like Laura was doing that all the time when she was pregnant.
Yeah.
And I was doing it. I'd be like talking to the
and then you would hear
I couldn't
respond,
hear the child.
And then you decide to start a jihad.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
I was like,
that'll hold up in court.
Yeah. It's just normal baby stuff.
Yeah.
No, you do want to talk to your baby for sure.
Yeah. Well, also, I love the part where she's like, you got to come south. We'll be waiting for you, all of us.
All of us.
I mean, Rebecca Ferguson was great. I think Denny, I'm not entirely sure his thoughts on Jessica. Did Jessica have a boy in defiance of the Bene Gesserit?
Yes. Yeah.
Out of love for for Leto. So did she betray the Bene Gesserit out of love? Is she the movie's great villain? Which is, do the Bene Gesserit maybe, are they right to develop a super person, but to do it in a plan? And is she reckless for having done this? I'm not entirely certain, because Jessica could be one of the great villains in the universe. She brings about the death of billions because she is selfish. Because the Bene Gesserit, like they said, they have multiple candidates. So I find her fascinating. Denny's view of her.
Yeah. So in Dune's version, right, when the Reverend Mother says, "How dare
Lynch's version?"
Oh, I'm sorry. What did I say? Dune's version.
Dune's version, which is the real version.
In the OG.
Yeah, she's correct. She's correct. Yes,
in the correct version. No, in Lynch's version, the Reverend Mother says, "How dare you? Like, you thought you could make a Kwisatz Haderach
out of love."
And Jessica says it meant so much to him. Like she's sort of pleading. She's like, it meant so much to Leto to have a boy. I just had to do it because I love him so much. But I think Jessica's response to the Reverend Mother in part 1 of Dune by Denny V was I wrong? When she said, you thought you could make a Kwisatz Haderach.
That is
and
interesting.
She's like, because I fucking did.
So this is another point where both interpretations are in the book. I'll read you the passage.
Has the text out.
I have the text. I mean, it's really interesting to me because the two movies pick up on different parts. Lynch's one picks up on the love part. Denis picks up on
the ambition.
So here's what happens. Reverend Mother says, "You were told to bear only daughters to the Atreides." Jessica, "It meant so much to him." Reply, "And you in your pride thought you could produce the Kwisatz Haderach." Jessica lifted her chin. "I sensed the possibility." So it both are there, right? It could go either way, and I think the two directors are picking up on different threads here. But anyway, John, to your point, I think you're totally right. If Jessica is driven by ambition and a desire to be the mother of the Kwisatz Haderach, and this does lead to things, and it maybe wouldn't have had the daughter of Fade Rautha been the Kwisatz Haderach, because he would have been more in thrall with the system. That's very. I think.
She knowing what we know and what and of course we spoiled it. Knowing what we know of Herbert's story, she's like the anti-Virgin Mary, right?
Yeah.
She is the mother of the greatest horror visited upon the universe that will wreck things for the next 3,000-4,000 years.
Yep.
When we last talked about this, about Dune Part 1, I was really listening to our episode on that. We spent a moment talking about the conversation between Jessica and Leto where they are sort of talking about the fact that they have totally different plans for their son and they never really talked about it. And then he says, "Will you protect Paul?" And she says, "Why would you ask me that?" And he says, "I'm not asking," or she says, "with my life." And he says, "I'm not asking his mother, I'm asking the Bene Gesserit."
Yeah.
And that I think like also has, she's not in Dune 2, she is not protecting Paul the human being. She's protecting his Kwisatz Haderach. She's protecting the prophecy. She's protecting the symbol. She doesn't really give a shit if like he's in love with Chani. She's like, well, that's in the way. Just quick reminder to you, your hand is for somebody else. Is we need to use that strategically. She's not interested in like what Paul cares about or who he is as a person by the time we've gotten to Dune 2 and she's drank the water of life.
Yeah.
She's all Bene Gesserit and no mama anymore.
I will say it's complicated because the alternative, again, is a Kwisatz Haderach who is basically...
Fade?
Yeah, no, not Fade, but, someone who's more under the thumb of the Bene Gesserit. Because that's what they want. They want a Kwisatz Haderach they can control. And what would be that? That would be someone who, largely does things as they are, keeps things intact.
Sure.
And it's this push and pull between a kind of revolution, which comes with a huge cost, and the status quo, which leaves the Fremen and other people who are in positions of subjugation subjugated. I think this is the real like tension that's inherent in the source material and to some extent in Villeneuve's film as well. What did you guys think of the Emperor and Irulan, two new characters from this film?
I mean, then we can get into some of the Lynch stuff. I thought the world building again was weaker in part 2. In part 1, for instance, we get a snapshot of the Sardaukar world, and in a few seconds, it's detail rich. We get the weird throat music guy. We get the enemies crucified, being bled out. We get some ceremony. We get an idea of this weird world that is one gigantic boot camp for holy warriors. None of that is present in the Imperium. The design, it really feels like an afterthought. It really, again, this world building doesn't feel, versus, Jose Ferreira's incredible throne room and all the spectacle. Look, the way the Imperium is introduced in part 1 with the Herald and then the Spacing Guild and this conversation about how expensive it is, but how they live in a world of ceremony. It just felt, the princess is not much of a character to begin with, and I can see how he tried to solve that by kind of making her a Bene Gesserit, who's in with the conspiracy. But I found it dramatically, I found it to be lacking. And I thought that Walken was very miscast.
I agree. Afterthought is the right word. I think it just felt like a missed opportunity. There's all these weird shit in Dune, and you have this opportunity to have the House Corrino, the Emperor's house. Why it could be weird as shit. We've already seen the Herald come, as you put it, John, and he's weird, and it's all very interesting. And now,
but it's powerful. It's big. It gives a bigger sense of, they tried to convey that with his gigantic silver spaceship.
Yeah.
But it still didn't have, I think it was a mistake not to show us the broader world beyond. I don't know.
I agree with that. No, I agree with that. I think my main complaint with the film is that I think Villeneuve is struggling with how to convey the sense of scale of what's going on. So one example of this, just to jump ahead to the Harkonnens battle scene. This is the one where Fade is fighting in the infrared sequence. There's all these shots of like the crowd screaming. And, you get these, this sequence of a parade of people coming down and again, the teeming crowd, the teeming masses. But we never see any of those people close up. So we don't, for all we know, they're just CGI beings. They're just like window dressing. And one thing that Lynch's Dune does so well, this was something we talked about in the first episode, but I'm going to mention it again, is those little details are there. We actually see characters doing things who are not the main people. We see the
Mhm.
guy vacuuming up the off gas of the spice. We see people in the battle room trying to decode the Harkonnen language and stuff. We see the guys in the spice mining, like David Lynch himself, covered in spice.
Yeah.
And we never see this in Villeneuve's film. I think that's a part of the problem why it doesn't feel big.
The Harkonnens in the new version did bored me. I mean, let me tell you. First of all, your main villain soaking in a bubbling oil bath once is weird and scary. But it's like twice in part two. Like, and like when and at one point he's like fucking smoking a hookah, enjoying a tub. I got to go back to Dune. Kevin I forget the actor's name.
Kenneth McMillan.
Kenneth McMillan. Thank you. His Harkonnen is very human.
Mm-hmm.
He's lusty and jealous and paranoid and grasping. He's very, very human, and dangerous because of that. And I found the Harkonnens to be very one note. Austin Butler was trying to have fun, but Batista's screaming really bored me, and Sarsgaard, whom I love, it wasn't very interesting. They seemed so alien and so distant. Although I will say during the gladiator scene, I did have a thought in the theater the second time where I was like, "Oh, the Harkonnens have fun." They're all cheering, they're having a good time. I'm like, it's they love what do they love? They love the hallmarks of good. They love a weird glob fireworks.
I like the fireworks.
They love a fireworks. They love a parade. Then they love the theater. Not bad.
Laura,
That's
not a bad day.
You had a comment about his backup dancers.
Oh, I love his Lady Gaga backup dancers. Yeah, where when he gets rid of the first two guys that were drugged, and now he's like fighting with Yue, right? Dr. Yue, right?
I don't know who it is.
That's
That
Dr.
Yue?
Yue, I think.
No.
Oh no.
Yeah, I didn't. It's just some Atreides guy because Yue has.
Dr. Yue already died.
He's died. Yue has the Imperial conditioning sign, so it's some other Asian guy.
Oh my gosh! Listen, I saw it when I was tired by myself, and I haven't read the book, so everybody calm down.
Well, this is not in the book.
Huey is stabbed. He's stabbed.
Oh right, then join her. Then
Yes.
join her.
Right.
He's
Got
killed
it.
by
All right.
Now I am annoyed that the Atreides who are his sacrifice we had not seen before.
Yeah.
That's why I was
that
confused because they
right.
were going on about them being Atreides, so I thought
we've seen them. Yeah, exactly. Okay.
and
defend
I'm also,
myself.
it also mildly annoyed me that Thufir was
no Thufir.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, but to the Lady Gaga point.
Yes, finish the Lady Gaga point. We got to talk.
I just like that, when we got the gladiator scene, and we don't really see these guys in the beginning. But when we get to fight number 3, and it's actually getting like a little bit tough for Fade, the Lady Gaga dancers come out. They've got a black horns and like and helmet kind of thing, but they do really look like something from a music video.
Yeah.
And they're moving like with kind of hunch, and they go. And Fade has to be like, I got this, y'all. I got it. Okay.
Yeah, they try to
They keep trying to kill him for him. They're like, well, don't worry, we got it. And he's like, back up, everybody, back up.
We want to help you.
I loved that.
That part was fun. I mean, we finish up this part. I mean, I do think shooting it in infrared is a cool choice. And that was clearly, I think it's cool because it's not been done before, and I think that's very much Greg Fraser.
Is that what they were doing?
It's infrared, yeah. It's infrared, which is
why?
Well, okay. I mean, it looks cool. That's my answer. But you can ask Denis why. But the thing is, Fraser he's done some of that with in Zero Dark 30. They did some of that infrared stuff when they did the attack on.
That is.
They had the infrared stuff in Zone of Interest.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes. Zone of Interest as well. Yeah.
Although that was like much more visually,
even weirder.
Obviously infrared.
Yes, that's right. This looks like black and white.
I thought it was just like an iPhone filter.
Yeah. Well, it is truly infrared.
I thought it was just. I mean, honestly, I just thought the Harkonnens in this iteration had a very strong, very specific aesthetic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And everything's black and white.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nobody's allowed to wear any colors in
Yeah.
Gidi Prime.
It's like the classic, I don't know, P. Diddy used to have a black and white party, and that's what this is.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, you can find Villeneuve talking about this and what motivated it. I'm not going to go into
really?
it. Really?
I'm kind of curious.
Okay, fine. I'll tell
Prime.
you. I mean, what it is he thinks on his view, Gidi Prime has a white sun, and so this is what Gidi Prime looks like because it has a white sun. That's his take
interesting.
On it.
Okay, okay.
But anyway, whatever.
I see. It's like the light quality. No, I'm glad to know that there is something motivating it.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Okay, but the lack of Thufir Hawat is, I think, a real loss because the actor who Stephen McKinley Henderson, who's in the upcoming film Civil War, and he's been in lots of stuff. I think he's great as Thufir, and there is a role for Thufir to play in this part of the book.
Sure.
In Lynch's Dune. So here's what happens, right? Thufir, their mentat, Piter de Vries, who we all love Piter de Vries, especially we love Brad Dourif as Piter de Vries, the greatest, is killed. The Harkonnens guy is killed. And so they're like, we need a mentat. So we'll just use the Atreides mentat, Thufir, to be our guy. But of course, he's got to have some incentive to be loyal to us. So they drug him. This is true. This is in the Lynch film, but it's also in the book. They drug him and then they give him an antidote every day that he can use.
In the book, it's text.
Yes.
There is a cat that you have to milk.
With a rat taped to it. It's the best part, one of the best parts of Lynch's Dune. I don't think we talked about it very much in the first record.
Is that in the book?
No, I'm kidding.
The cat is not in the book.
Well, look, right. That's a Lynch invention, as is the juice of Sappho.
I'm not sure on the juice of Sappho, actually. I think that might.
No, that is a Lynchian invention.
Okay. Well, I know the little thing he says.
That's the Lynch invention.
Yeah, the mantra.
The little Sappho prayer.
Yeah, the prayer
is a Lynchian invention.
That's right.
I think it was a bummer that that we weren't able to follow other survivors of the betrayal.
Yeah, I agree. Also, the mentats
especially since his reunion with Gurney wasn't as emotional as I wanted it to be.
Yeah.
Especially since I had forgotten how it was in the book. But I had to do backtracking as to wonder why. At first I was like, why is he a spice harvester?
I was also confused.
Later they explained that he's a smuggler.
Yeah.
But at the time, it just really confused me and kind of muted their reunion. I wanted more from their reunion.
Yep, I agree.
Yeah.
So the lack of mentats, I think, is a real bummer. And that's part of, as to your point, John, about earlier, about the world building of one is expansive and leaves all these interesting threads that many of them are not picked up in this movie. In particular, the mentats. I mean, there's no mentats in this movie,
especially since I love again, Dune is hard to read, but it was brilliant world building. But I thought it was a real lost opportunity to not comment on how Dune is a future where computers don't exist because we fought a war against artificial intelligence, and we won that war. And so the way we solved in complex computations is drugs.
Yep.
It's kind of an analog world.
It is.
And if you have complex things to do, you have these priest people who do drugs and can do what computers do.
Yes, exactly. No, and that it would speak to an anxiety of our current era. And so
100%.
I think it's a little bit like, it probably, I think that's a carryover of the fact that the first film was probably written in 2019, right? And I think he wrote both films together. And so it's just now 2024. These are deep concerns that were just not as present in 2019. I think that's a part of it. If he does Messiah, he might, I suspect that stuff will come back in.
Mm-hmm.
I hope so.
Just to actually continue on the Harkonnens, one thing we get in this film that we don't get in the Lynch film is Lady Margot.
And a good one.
Lady Margot Fenring, which is a fun sequence. The sequence where she seduces Fade, and And then, and then the kind of like when she's conversing with her, doing the like, recap with her sisters afterwards. She's like, the bloodline is secure. It's a girl. I love that stuff. I think it's great.
I loved it.
Yeah,
too.
look, in the economy of storytelling, it's not like Denny V's Dune is he had a vision, and one of that vision is he wanted to tell the story of the powerful Lady Jedi's, of the Bene Gesserit and their machinations, and he wanted to devote time to that, and I'm fine with that because I find them to be a fantastic invention. I really do.
So
They're a tremendous idea,
But John, I see you're holding a book there. Tell us about what is this book you've got there?
Oh, you want to go into this?
Yeah.
I just want to plug it because Max Every is a great journalist, and he wrote a book called A Masterpiece in Disarray: David Lynch's Dune, an Oral History. It's a tremendous book that follows the production of the movie. He talks to dozens and dozens of people who are involved in the movie,
including I've heard one John DeVore.
Yes. Oh, yes. He's in the very back.
In the index.
What a funny guy. I talk about the how my mom in 1984 bought me the sandworm toy.
Love it.
I love it. Anyway, but it's great. And it's a wonderful book, like I was telling you guys earlier, of like a pop culture scholarship. And if you, I do unironically, as you know, love the Dune version. It's flawed. It's not the sum of its parts.
We keep calling it the Dune version. Sorry,
the
Lynch version.
Sorry,
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that there is only one Dune between the three of us.
Yeah, right. Yeah. There's Dune and there's Lesser Dune.
Yeah.
I unironically love it. I'm glad that it's having its day.
Yes.
And I know that it can be interminably boring and bizarre. The book is interminably boring and bizarre.
I think it's got time to be boring. It's there's so much packed in.
Yeah.
And they align everything. There's no time to be boring. He's like, anyway, their love grew. Moving on.
I love seeing these new movies through the lens of Dune. Yes. I mean, it's great. I really saw a lot of Star Wars this time around, and how influential this must have been to Lucas. And again, I brought up the Jedi, how lame it was to look at the Jedi, Bene Gesserit, and be like, you know what? They should be guys, and they should be samurai.
Yeah.
I mean, that's essentially what he did. That's the Jedi and the Bene Gesserit are one-to-one sort of superpowered sect that aids and thwarts government
and looks for special kids with lots of
it's true. They're always looking for the midi-chlorian count. Yeah.
The chosen one. That's exactly right.
Did you? All right. So you got to go side by side as far as the worms, though. So in this movie,
you gotta
Villeneuve has every visual effect at his disposal. He could do anything he wants. He's also got the best sound designers. So it can be huge, it can be big, it can be loud. These are things that Lynch's Dune just couldn't. I mean, he was constrained by having the practical effects. I'm gonna say something controversial. So I feel like the speed and sound and chaos of the worm riding is better in the Villeneuve Dune, but I feel like the worms look bigger and more impressive in Lynch's Dune.
I agree with you 100%.
Yeah, but in Dune 2, part 2, we get Worm Uber.
Well, Worm Uber is cool.
But look, I gotta tell you, it did logistically in my head. I'm like, how do we get the little tent huts?
Yeah.
How do we get them
on there?
On the worm.
I had the same question. Somebody calls it, somebody tames it, and then they're like, everybody climb on. And we get to actually see that in Lynch's version a little bit, right? Because he
throws down the rope.
He throws down the rope, and then they all come up and celebrate on the top. But yeah, if you got like a little,
hut.
A little hut, if you're trying to create some sort of like Venice how do you get it up there? I don't know. I love it though. I love that. I love when we see Lady Jessica riding a worm.
Yeah,
to the
Gurney's
south.
in there too. At one
fucking
point, he's just
awesome.
like chilling inside.
I also love.
Yeah, it's easy.
Justin didn't notice this part, but at one point when Paul is, trying to convince them that he is the Kwisatz Haderach, that he is the Messiah, he starts telling somebody about their life. Like he's like, your grandmother died 9 moons ago. She didn't have an eye because she had like a tough crossing on the Shia Lute and a rock hit her eye. And so she's like, I was just like, oh damn. Like I think they did really want to get you to understand
the danger.
That they do have worm Uber, but it's like, it's rough. It's not an easy go.
Worm Uber, yeah, it's tough. It's like actual Uber. I mean,
You take your life into your hands.
You don't know what you're going to get.
Yeah, you just don't.
That too, because you don't know until you show up and you're like, is it a grandfather worm?
Right.
Or is it not? Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good point. I like that a lot. I thought that's great. I mean, but the problem is that
you just didn't think that the
scale
CGI...
of the worm, the CGI does not. I think this is just Villeneuve I think he's a very good director, and I love a lot of his films. I think though this is a thing where he really struggles. I think he struggles with scale, and the scale of the worms to the people. You never get a real sense of like how giant these things are. They go fast, it's true. But because you never see like a person next to a worm, and right, that's the thing. You needed more of that, where the person is like CGI'd.
There's not enough worms eating people.
Yeah, and yeah.
I thought the worms were. I get this. I got the sense that Denny V could have done without the worms.
But the spice is the worm. The worm is the spice.
No, just as a concept, that he could have done without monsters. And just that's the feeling that because the practical worm effects. If you take away the really bad sort of green screen sort of stuff of the 1984, like if you look at the edit of the worm writing, first of all, the thumper looks better because it's bigger. He's got this shovel tool, like it just, and then when the worms first bursts out, it's hard to be practical effects. I guess is the thing here. I think it's just hard to beat it. It looks real, and the sand looks real, and I found the worm stuff to be very underwhelming.
That's interesting that you said that you thought like Denny could do without it, because we do have a new scene in part 2 that we did not have in the Lynch version, which is how you see the water of life and how it's made.
Lynch filmed that, by the way. You can find that in.
He did.
Oh, fun.
Yeah, you can find it on YouTube.
But it is like, you do see like there's like this impulse for him to try and like demystify, demagic some of the. I mean. He's like, do you want to know where the water of life comes from? Here's the gnarly process, and they joke, the Fremen, the northern Fremen joke about it being worm piss and just like poison. So yeah, maybe he is like trying to suck the magic out of the world of Dune.
I think, you guys are right. I'm being convinced more and more that is what he's going for, which actually weirdly makes me like the film less. I think the film for me, the magic of the 84 Lynch Dune is that
the magic
is the mystical dimensions of it, which Lynch really cared about, and obviously Herbert really cared about. Herbert is a guy who's like spending time in the desert doing LSD. Like this is
and the worms are scary in Lynch's movie.
Yeah,
they're scary and they're huge and they are what they are, which is monsters.
Yeah,
gods. I don't know. The worms were my least favorite part of Denny V's movies.
So to go from that, I want to talk about my favorite part of the movie, which is the sound design and the score. So this is where I think the film really shines. I think one of the things that, just to give you some examples of sound design stuff that I think is really successful in this film. It's also in the first Dune, to be fair, but the Baron has some sort of spinal implant which allows him to float, and now we see in this film the Harkonnens in general have this, and people they do this. At one point they're flying over the suspensors. They're flying over like rocks and stuff.
I thought that looked beautiful.
Looks great. but it sounds great. I feel like the way I was describing it to Laura earlier was it sounds like how haptic feedback feels. This kind of clicking, but with a kind of deepness to it. And I think he just like nails that. It sounds so cool. And every time the Baron floats, you hear it. I think that stuff is great. I think there's also the
shield.
The shields are cool, and they have a great sound to them. I think I mean I think the worms sound great. I think he benefits from the fact that there's been huge advances in sound mixing technology since 1984. And he can just access the voice. Sounds fucking cool, right? They can go super low and they can and high at the same time. They can mix it and they can put it all over the place in terms of the actual mix. So it's coming from everywhere. These things I think are really cool, and he's utilizing the technology to its fullest. And that's where I think it's kind of failing in the visuals, is because he has all of course the visual technology, and it's just not coming through to me as much. But I just love the sound design and the sound mix. The other thing I really love, and John, I'm very curious to hear what your thoughts are on this. I do think the Zimmer score is great. Now, one thing that I think is very cool about the Zimmer score is I think it's one of his most melody-forward scores. Zimmer tends to write these very minimalist scores that have repetitive, driving elements. Think of all the scores he wrote for Nolan. A lot of them are very minimal tonality in order to kind of, get this kind of tension. He wants to build tension. But this score is a very classical score. The theme, there's a couple themes that get repeated throughout. One is the Muad'Dib theme. Then there's the Chani love theme. The other part is the theme that kind of builds towards the kind of culmination, the Kwisatz Haderach theme. And I think Zimmer is like weaving these things all together in repeating them over and over again so that they can become part of like your subconscious in a way. And I think it's really cool because it weaves into the themes of the film, which is like he starts out as this kind of little meek Muad'Dib guy, right? The Muad'Dib is the little mouse guy. And he falls in love. There's this soaring love theme, but there's so much melancholy too. and it comes full circle around to this like bombastic, like now he's the Kwisatz Haderach, but it still retains all that melancholy, that mourning, that is part of the Chani theme. And I think it's just an incredibly successful score. And I think for me that it's the thing I think the score for me elevates the movie quite a lot. Anyway, John, what did you think of the score? Now that I've said this,
I don't disagree. You know, it's one of my favorites of his. You know, my favorite of his being the Man of Steel soundtrack.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
And the Man of Steel score has some of what you're talking about, which is very melancholic. It's very, you know, he's heroic, but he is heroic in a resigned sort of way. And so it's very melodious. The whole soundtrack, and it's not a one-to-one sort of thing, but that underarching sadness is in both of them. And
the Harkonnen theme is this like horn sound. You know when they're doing the gladiator battle and there's like it kind of reminded me of the pod race scene in the Phantom Menace.
Totally.
Because that's like what's happening. You know, in the Phantom Menace, they're always like giving that blaring horn sound.
Right. And we've got Jabba the Hutt, aka Baron Harkonnen, like having his snacks, watching. No, and 100%. I was thinking about the pod race the entire time. How could you not?
I don't know. Love the pod race scene.
I will talk to you for hours about the Phantom Menace.
Where do you stand on Phantom Menace, John?
I was part of that nasty proto-fandom that hated it. And then I had this realization years ago that Lucas was smart about many things, and one of them is that Star Wars is for children. And so if you were 9 and you saw Phantom Menace, unbelievable. And that has proven out. The people who I know who saw them when they were a kid, it's incredible. Revisiting those movies, I find them to be less cynical and pound for pound more imaginative than either of J.J. Abrams' Star Wars movies. I'm an enormous Rian Johnson, Last Jedi ride or die, and I think those movies have more. I think those movies have more in common with the prequels. But you know, the prequels have their flaws, dialogue being one of them, and sort of a janky arc. And I think Padma's. I think that's sadly fucked, lacking. But as I get older, I appreciate them more. They are singular, non-committee sci-fi blockbusters, and that doesn't happen anymore. Like the flaws of the movie were the flaws of one dude's vision, not an executive committee.
Well, John, you're going to get another movie like that this year, Megalopolis. So let's.
I mean, has anyone seen anything? Has anyone seen? Is there any footage of it?
I don't know. I haven't seen anything. I'm so excited.
Well, look, 100%.
He 100%. He's self-financed a movie.
I can't. Yes. Look, I think one thing when we get nostalgic about older genre movies that we're missing is I think we are missing watching pop art that fails because of somebody's vision fails versus this broader sort of strategy that somebody has.
Yeah, they're trying to make money and it's like cynically failed.
Right.
I think the reason the Marvel movies have become disappointing is because they fail on multiple levels. And the most successful Marvel movies of recent late, for me, like Eternals, failed because you could sense the filmmaker pushing back.
Interesting.
And losing.
Yeah, interesting.
Zhao loses. The Eternals is not a good movie, but I also love it because you can see her fighting a losing battle.
She's trying.
I mean, Scorsese said this, I think, and put it well when he said that there was a tension. The tension between art and commerce has existed from the beginning of filmmaking, and that was a very productive. He talked about it as a productive tension that was happening between, him and Coppola and the other directors in the 70s and 80s when they were working. And I think he's right. It's that productive tension that creates really interesting art, and it can sometimes be a failure. But that's what you need. You need that kind of back and forth, or not need, but anyway, it's nice to have.
It is nice to have, but what you have is commerce leaning more and more on IP, and what IP means is that you're bringing someone in to be a work for hire.
Exactly. There's no tension, right? Because it's just execute this plan. And what I hear you're saying with the Chloe Zhao one is there's tension there that makes it more interesting because Chloe Zhao is trying to do something.
I mean, she really is. It has some really weird stuff, has some really beautiful stuff, and stuff that you hadn't seen in Marvel, but ultimately Marvel wins because this is not her IP. Yeah. She didn't,
Yeah. I have not seen the Eternals, but because we just stopped watching Marvel movies, but
no, I mean, it's the one that people revile the most, but she is you can tell she's like, I want to make something beautiful from a very limited sort of genre.
Yeah. Let's check it out. We'll watch it.
Done.
All right, let's go. Wait, do you want to say something more?
About Dune Part 2?
Of course, I want to. Well, I want to do. Well, I just want to do a quick. No, let's do some Dune Part 2. Continue, but I want to do what I want to do next. Just to give you a heads up, is I want to just do a quick comparison. We just quick round robin on each of the elements of Dune between the two.
What do you mean by each of the elements? Like all the characters?
Characters and different dimensions.
Okay.
And
then I'll say my little bit. But I think for you, Justin, Part 1 you enjoyed more than Part 2.
I did.
You felt like you were excited about the promise of the tendrils that we saw into going into other parts of the world and how weird it could be, and it didn't quite follow through for you.
That is exactly my view.
Okay, so my view is that, and I said this in the Part 1 episode 2, is that what hooked me with Villeneuve's Dune was was how much he lingered on the interpersonal conflicts and that those intimate details. And I was really drawn to the parts of Dune Part 1 where we see Leto and Jessica having conversations about how they've been raising their kid and how that and their relationship or between Leto and Paul. And in this movie, I really enjoyed and was totally hooked and locked in on this movie when it was a conflict between Paul and between these two important, strong women in his life who have very different goals, very different hopes for who they want Paul to be and what his future is going to be. And he's trying to navigate that.
Yep.
And I was really compelled by that. So I love the turn that Jessica took in that, and that it allowed Paul to be in the middle of this. I liked that that Chani was an awesome, strong character, although I feel like she did have to spend most of this movie just looking furious. In your view, because you feel like he is the Kwisatz she's just wrong the whole time.
I know.
I didn't read it that way because I'm not beholden to the book because I haven't read the book. And so I kind of feel like when I watched Part 1, I was like, okay, I don't love some of the visual choices, but I'm interested in when he lingers on the interpersonal stuff.
Yeah.
I got a really lovely that really opened up in Part 2, and so I enjoyed Part 2 more than I enjoyed Part 1.
Yeah,
because Part 1 was so much beginning of the table setting and world building, and when I put that side to side with Lynch's Dune, I just feel like on the whole, and we're going to run through this in a second, Lynch's Dune just wins for me for world building. I'm just like, I like this. I miss my Piter. I miss my, it's hard not to, for me, I'm looking at the strange, vivid, amazing worlds that Dune that Lynch created, and they just are not as satisfying for me in Villeneuve's version in Part 1. I made my peace with that. I'm fine with that. I wasn't expecting to be transported in that way in Dune Part 2, and so I was really enjoying that stuff. I was less interested in the action because I'm always less interested in the action. Justin didn't like the action. I was
so bummed about the action.
I wish because we get quite a lot of
really
sort of economic / environmental sabotage, but I kind of wish that we had turned it a little bit into a special ops movie, to a heist movie, and spent more time planning and executing one spice harvester destruction.
Totally agree.
Did you guys see How to Blow Up a Pipeline?
Yes,
did.
I was thinking about that.
We did, yes.
I wanted a little bit of that, like especially because we're spending so much time with the Fremen.
And Villeneuve can do this. He did it in
know it.
Sicario. That's my
Exactly.
favorite of his films.
Exactly. So instead of like
That is my
4
favorite of his films.
Hell yeah. Instead of 4 sort of chaotic spice like blow up scenes,
Yeah.
like why don't we like get into like how are the Fremen doing this? Like let's plan it out. Let's see like again then like something goes wrong and they have to change the plans.
Would've
Like
been
I would have
cool.
had so much fun with that.
There's a part of me that wishes he had not had such a success with Arrival, and that he
Yeah.
had not been who he is now, which is the standard, the highbrow Hollywood sci-fi standard bearer.
Yep.
I wish maybe he would have not veered into that and given us some more realistic domestic action drama, political stuff. Because he's a very political director for a Hollywood director. And that to me is what works the most for Dune 2.
Yes,
Part 2,
I agree. I really
it is-
liked that. I liked he has a totally different perspective than Lynch did about this book.
I agree.
And in both of them, as we pointed out, are like compatible with Herbert, but they're just sort of amplifying different parts of it that they found interesting. And I think Chalamet's performance is really good.
I do too.
In Villeneuve's interpretation of that character, I think he does an excellent job, and he's slippery. I kind of can't tell sometimes. I mean, I feel like I was put into a more cynical mindset from jump with Villeneuve's version of it, such that like when he says things like the Fremen deserve one of their own to be the Messiah, I'm like, I don't even know if he's being earnest or not. I never know when he's being earnest and when he is trying to say the thing that will ingratiate him with the Fremen to get him to the next
really
step.
interesting.
I never
Okay,
know how long game he's playing.
That's really interesting. Let's just do lightning round now. Paul, we've got the 2 Pauls here to compare, and I think that's a really interesting take. We've got Chalamet and Kyle MacLachlan. John, I mean, where do you stand on this? I mean, these are very different interpretations of this character.
I think Timmy is a movie star in the way that Timmy goes from boy to mad prophet better than MacLachlan, who is he's wonderful, he's weird, he's dreamy, he is physically formidable.
Yeah.
He's a powerful, he's physically powerful. But when we meet him, he's more of a man, I feel. But I think that they both did well. Paul is a Disney princess.
He sure is.
Well, I think what's interesting, so when you look at Kyle MacLachlan's career, which obviously we cannot look at Chalamet's career yet, because we can retrospectively look back on Kyle MacLachlan's career, I think really, his career is defined by Twin Peaks. I think that's Dale, whatever, what is his name? Dale something. Dale, anyway, I'm blanking on his name, but whatever. Cooper, yes. Cooper is, I think, the character that defines, for me, Kyle MacLachlan's career. And that's if a character is very different from Paul. And yet, in David Lynch's Dune, he's kind of Dale Cooper a little bit, which sort of doesn't quite work.
The reason I have always been drawn to David Lynch's Dune is the story of a talented young person, a very talented young person, given a Hollywood blockbuster that does not succeed, that fails, that kind of wrecks him, that forces him to soul search and then find a new non-Hollywood direction. And for me, he obviously connects with his marquee movie star in the Hollywood debacle and reinvents him in Blue Velvet, because Blue Velvet is the precursor Blue Velvet is David Lynch creating the entire vocabulary that will sustain the next 30 years of his career. It's remarkable what he does. He does Dune. He is digested by Hollywood. He is excreted. And then he creates this weird 1950s hallucinatory world of predators and innocent women I love Blue Velvet, and I think it's great that Kyle MacLachlan goes with him on that ride. But that to me is why I love Dune. That story creatively,
Yeah,
is
the
why
creative sort of
Dune.
arc and the role it
Right.
plays.
Right.
Laura, do you want to mention your Blue Velvet connection? I didn't catch this, but then Laura pointed it out to me, and I was like, "Yeah."
In Villeneuve's Part 2, when the Baron Harkonnen is killed, not by Alia, bummer, but and they put him out in the desert. There is an insert shot of his
the
ear
ear
and the ants crawling around on it, which I had to think like. That's a nod,
total
right?
nod to
That's a
Lynch.
thank you for your service, Lynch. Like
Laura, that is absolutely correct. What a fantastic connection.
Yeah.
That has to be.
It has to.
be.
You can't
there
look
has
at
to
an
be a
ear
wink.
and ants and think of anything but Blue Velvet,
Yeah,
right?
it is
Like in
exactly
film
right.
language.
That is your pull quote right there.
Okay, good. So Leto. All right, so we kind of already covered Leto because he's not in this movie, but Jürgen Prochnow versus Oscar Isaac.
Is that a toss-up for you, Justin?
It is a toss-up for me. I like Jürgen Prochnow a lot. Refuse is great.
Yeah, I like them both.
Yeah, I love them both. And
Refuse is something we say in our house all the time.
Well, I think the thing is Isaac. What Oscar Isaac does, he gets the warmth of Leto really well. But Jürgen Prochnow also does. He's really, really good as Leto.
That scene in the rain before they leave Caladan
in the rain
is really lovely.
Really wonderful.
And look, his scene right before he bites down on the tooth.
Yes.
And the betrayal scene too. But go on.
So that's a toss up. But now Jessica. Okay, so obviously Rebecca Ferguson is a great actress.
I gotta go Rebecca Ferguson for
Francesca
this one.
Annis is also great.
She's great too.
Her hair I think wins though. Right? She's got the cool
I get a tension headache just looking at that. Just thinking about how many pins are in there, how much hairspray.
But I think you're right. Rebecca Ferguson brings more. I mean, there's something.
Jessica's also written a little better.
Exactly.
Yes.
In Lynch's Dune, she gets to show that she's formidable.
Yeah.
But
Gurney Halleck. So we've got two. So Patrick Stewart plays Gurney Halleck in Lynch's Dune. And
Patrick Stewart.
When Patrick Stewart when he sees Paul,
young
having survived, he's like, Paul. The heartbreak. It's great. It's great.
Yeah.
I
love Josh Brolin, but I think it's got to be Patrick Stewart. I mean, that's like this is pre Star Trek. I just think he already. I think he's like 30 something, but he looks like he's like 60. It's incredible.
Barking all of his lines.
It's incredible.
I love it.
All right, Duncan, Idaho. Now, this one I think is an easy one because the guy the Duncan, Idaho of Lynch's Dune is pretty minimal. And they give a lot more with the Momoa stuff. And I think the way you put it, John, in our previous record was like, he's flirting a lot with Paul. And I think that's great. I think Momoa does a good job.
When I rewatched Part 1 again, I found I love Momoa. I love turning him even more into a Han Solo-y character. I found his death to not be as weepy as I wanted it to be. I don't know why. They really set up this one. I don't know why I didn't.
It just wasn't as. It needed to be a little more epic, maybe.
Who played him in the Lynch?
The Lynch one was played. He was played by this guy named Richard Jordan, who I don't know who that guy is.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, I know who Richard Jordan. He was a lot of TV shows in the 80s.
I got it. Yeah. It seemed like that. Yeah. He was more of. I mean, a lot of the cast in Lynch one was not as prominent. I mean, they weren't the biggest actors of the time, like in Villeneuve's. Dr. Yui. We have Dean Stockwell and Chang Chen.
I think Dean Stockwell was great.
Oh, Dean Stockwell. It's hard to beat. Although I will say, in Villeneuve's interpretation, I do like that Yui, the way he sort of feels Paul is cool.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Do the doctors also take spice in this? Or
I think they do.
Okay. Because what is he doing? I love it though.
But this also leans into a world where people are highly specialized and trained to do things without diagnostic machines and computers.
Yes.
And that is again a part of part one that makes you ask questions about the world that's kind of missing.
It's missing. Exactly. Yes. Okay. Thufir Hawat, Freddie Jones with the huge eyebrows.
I mean,
I think Freddie Jones is fucking great. He was like, and let me tell you, when they first come in, and I think they lost that in part one, but when they first test Paul, all three of them come in.
Yeah.
And Thufir kind of like sits and leans back, and he's kind of like a Friar Tuck sort of character. And I loved him.
It's good. But he's going up against Stephen McKinley Henderson, who's great. I just think the design is a little different with the Mentats. I do like when they calculate their eyes go into the back of their skull.
Cool.
That is cool. But they don't get to actually vocalize their calculations, which Thufir gets to do in Lynch's Dune. So I'm giving it to Thufir in Lynch's Dune.
Yeah.
Is Thufir...
Lynch's Dune is going to win. Go on.
Well, yeah, it's going to win, but I'm just...
With us,
we're going...
Not even...
I mean, spoiler alert, John.
Yeah. Is Thufir the one who's like... I'm trying to remember if it's Thufir or Gurney who's like also like running like security.
Thufir.
Thufir. Oh, yeah, right. Because I do like that too when they're like, we found another sabotage device in Lynch's version. In Lynch's version, Thufir is like, we're finding these too easily.
I love it. He's so good. And also just the design of the Mentats is fucking cool. They always have... So, okay, in the book, they're described as having red stained lips. That is true because they drink the juice of Sappho. But Lynch is like, can we also make them have giant eyebrows?
Gotta have giant eyebrows.
That rules. Okay, how about Piter DeVries? I mean, this is no fucking contest.
We've already talked about Piter at length before.
Brad Dourif is just a champion. I mean, he may be the MVP of Lynch's.
And let me tell you something. His death scene is incredible. When he catches, and he just stumbles back and his eyes are wide. He's like, ah! And then he collapses.
Yeah, he just flies backwards. It's great. I mean, everything Brad Dourif is doing. We rewatched it and we were like, he's.
The hand and chin work.
Even if that movie was absolutely terrible, I'd be like 5 stars because of Piter DeVries.
Agreed.
Raban, the Beast Raban, Glossu Raban is his full name. Paul L. Smith and Dave Bautista. So I mean, now I don't know who Paul L. Smith
I'll give it to Dave. I'll give it to Bautista.
You're going to Bautista.
I like Dave Bautista, but it's just all of the. There's so much texture in Lynch's Dune. And they're just, again, he's just so noisy and so inhuman in a way that bored me.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Wait, John, let me make the case for the Lynch Dune for John, because I think you might have just briefly forgot that there is in the Villeneuve Dune, there's no scene where the Beast Raban rips a piece of an upside down cow off of it and eats it. And there's also no scene where he squishes a bug and drinks his juice. And there's also no scene where he just pushes a random little person into like some bubbling water.
You're 100% right. Now that I mention it, I forgot that on Gidi Prime, they have things called the Pain Capri Sun.
Yeah,
because you want to talk about sound design. When he crushes the little bug, it screams. And so on Gidi Prime, you can't have a juice box without a little bit of pain.
Yeah, that's right.
Causing somebody, something, some sentient thing, some pain. An incredible flourish.
It's got to be Lynch's Raban.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I mean, are we compelled by sort of the fact Bautista is making him a really pathetic, scared character.
It is true.
In part 2.
Bautista is good at this too.
Yeah. You know, maybe we're not as excited about. Maybe we just wanted to be the Beast and
Raban.
Juice.
Yeah,
but
in Lynch's Dune, he's a
Raban
moron.
does run twice.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. Okay. Fade Routha, Sting, and Austin Butler, 2 rock stars of their generation.
I mean, he gives Austin Butler more to do than Sting.
Yes.
Sting looks really vibed.
I mean, he looks. Where is the fucking?
He's got the codpiece
with the wings.
He looks like when he's holding that cat with a rat taped to him with some neon purple on top of it. Like, I feel like Sting is like, I like this movie. He's grinning. Like he's
having a great time. Okay, I didn't realize this because I wasn't really thinking about this, but in this Entertainment Tonight released this video of like Lynch talking about Dune like right before it was released or around the time it was released. And I didn't realize this, but it's gotta be, it's obviously right. Sting was the biggest star of Dune. He was he was like the thing. Everyone was like, "Oh, Sting is in Dune. Let's go see Dune." And then they were disappointed because he was in 5 minutes of the movie. And I think that's kind of kick-ass, actually. That like he had basically, between the time he was cast and filmed and the time Dune comes out, his like career had really taken off. I think his music career, and also he had done some movies in between. So anyway, Sting. I'm going Sting.
Do you think Austin Butler decided on his own to have Stellan's voice for no
Yes.
reason?
Good question.
I want to know.
Good question.
Inquiring minds. Like, was Austin like, yeah, like I'll be your psychotic fuckboy, but like I'm gonna do an accent because that's what I do.
He has definitely become the Tom Hardy of his generation, where he's always doing a voice.
I mean, the Tom Hardy is the Tom Hardy.
Yeah,
That's, of course. I'm just thinking of Austin Butler. He's a little
Put
younger.
some respect on his
younger.
name.
Okay.
I do like that. It was really, it was really enjoyable that he was doing an impression the entire movie.
I love it. This one I think is no contest again, but going the other direction. Stilgar, Everett McGill versus Javier Bardem. I'm going Bardem.
Yeah. And again, though, I think he has more to do.
Yeah. All love to Big Ed.
I love Big Ed, but I don't think Big Ed's as good an actor. I'm sorry. Big Ed.
No.
The shout out Mapes.
Can I you skipped Chani?
Did I?
Yes.
Oh, shoot. Okay, let's do Chani. Sorry. Jeez, I'm sorry. Chani. Sean Young.
No comparison.
And Zendaya. Yeah, it's
Zendaya.
It's
Although I do like Tell Me of Your Homeworld Usul.
I mean, Sean Young. Yeah.
Tell Me of Your Homeworld.
She's got the permed hair and everything. She's like,
no, she's got cool braids.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Okay, Chani, easy. All right. Shout out Mapes. Linda Hunt versus Golda Rosheuvel.
I mean, I got to give it to Linda Hunt.
Linda Hunt.
I mean,
Linda Hunt.
Amazing.
Just
housekeeper.
Just weird. 5 seconds, just intense weirdness. She's just out of the gate.
Yep.
Reverend Mother Helen Gaius Mohiem. Sean Phillips versus Charlotte Rampling.
So I love Sean Phillips in this. I thought the design of the Bene Gesserit in Lynch's Dune was better than the sort of black lace, boxy sort of nun thing, which I thought visually was dull. I just loved the design of Lynch's Bene Gesserit.
I agree with that. Although I will say, when the Bene Gesserit, I think it's the Bene Gesserit or whatever, when the Fremen Bene Gesserit people like are wearing those like tall, mask things or whatever. That's kind of
like
cool.
Those. I think it's helpful that we see their faces in Lynch's version.
Yeah.
They're Sean's so expressive in the Lynch version.
Get out of my mind!
Yes. And the
kill this child. She's an abomination.
And the bald head thing too. Like he chose actresses that have like really sharp cheekbones and extraordinary features, and even I think put some highlighter on those cheekbones so they're so like they look like they're like sculpted out of clay, and their head is shining, and there's like something.
They look like the Harkonnens. Sorry. Keep going. Sorry.
I don't know. There's something like unsettling and gorgeous, but also like they're very feminine and also not. I don't know. I think the design for Lynch's is awesome. And I think Charlotte Rampling is just kind of like dour and it's kind of low key.
I do like Charlotte Rampling, but I'm with you guys.
I wanted them to be a little more hysterical.
Liette Kynes. Now this is a complicated one because you've got the gender flip and and the character gets a little bit more to do, I think, in the new one. But you've got Max von Sydow versus Sharon Duncan Brewster.
I think that she has a bit more to do in part one. And Max von Sydow, who, like, in the list of famous people, The Exorcist he was pretty well known.
Yeah.
And his role amounts to a cameo, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he's famous. Jose Ferreira's famous at the time. But I give it to her.
I'm gonna give it to Sydow just because I kind of like. I don't know.
Look, I'll give you a defense of it.
Yeah.
And that is because his description of the still suit scene, Denny V erases the urine.
True.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
From-
urine
And the feces.
being processed in the
Which is
thigh
a-
pads. I had a lot of questions.
Oh, Laura, thank you so much for bringing that up. the thigh pad urine and feces processor is very important to me.
The reclaimed water circulates to catch pockets from which you can drink through this tube at your neck. Urine and feces are processed in the thigh pads.
Cedal delivers that like a fucking champ.
Yeah.
And there's a part of me that's like Denny B. I'm like, he's like, no, this is too stupid to include, and it's not, because you gotta pee in the desert, but you can't on a racket. You can't waste that moisture. And more importantly, you gotta drink your pee water.
Gotta.
That's right.
I do like this
gotta.
running, like, don't let your liquids out. Like, that was also really
Yes,
funny
that was
when
the funny
Jessica
part,
was about to
yes.
barf and he's like, don't let it out. Don't do it.
That was good. But I will say, in defense of the Sharon Duncan Brewster, she does get the coolest part where the
Hell
death
yeah.
scene where she's like, "I serve only one master, Shai Hulud," and then she thumps her way to.
That is
That is
rad.
kick ass.
That's rad.
Next up is Emperor Shaddam IV, Jose Ferrer versus Christopher Walken. I think it's no contest.
Jose.
I thought Jose Ferrer was amazing.
Yeah. I mean, Christopher Walken is an amazing actor. I don't know what the fuck he's doing in this movie. Princess Irulan, Virginia Madsen, and Florence Pugh. Both not given very much to do. This movie is a
No,
bit of a
and they
toss-up.
try to give Florence Pugh, as we mentioned, more to do,
Yeah.
and even then it wasn't enough.
Yeah, I go Flo. I think she's bringing as much soul to this character as she
She's
can.
more complicated. She's a
Virginia
more
just
complex
looks kind of like, what's going on in a lot
Yeah.
of the scenes.
Yeah.
I think she just kind of looks wide-eyed and an ingenue, and Flo's doing more.
Now, this next one is, I think, the easiest one. All right, but let me say it, and then I want to say a little quick story about what my experience with this. So, Alia, or Alia of the Saint Alia of the Knife, Alicia Witt versus Anya Taylor-Joy. Now, when I saw that Anya Taylor-Joy was playing Alia, I yelped with joy because I was like, "What? This is gonna be so cool! They're gonna like have her be born and age up." Like really quickly, or they're gonna de-age her, or they're gonna have her do the voice on top of a child. It's gonna be fucking cool. And then I get to the movie, and it's just one scene of like a future memory, and Ali is never born, and I'm mega disappointed. I'm like, where is the demon child abomination?
Versus, boy, he is the Kwisatz Haderach.
One of the coolest parts of the fucking movie. Oh my god!
Yes.
Her way she kills the Baron too. She's so gleeful.
Yeah, she's got she Gom Jabars him, rips out
his
some sort of little like
his
things.
nipple cords.
Yeah.
I don't know. He doesn't have. Does
He's
he
got
have
like a nipple rings or something.
Yeah,
No, he doesn't have a heart.
He doesn't have a heart plug because he says everyone gets on here, but not the Baron.
Not the Baron.
The
yeah.
Baron doesn't have a heart plug. So
he's got tubes in his body. She just pulls them out.
okay, and then he flies around the room like a deflated balloon.
Yeah.
Mm.
It's incredible. And into the mouth of Shai Hulud. What do we got?
All right,
What's
next up, Lady Margot Fenring. It's obvious it's Lea Seydoux. She's not in the other one.
Yeah.
Last couple ones here. I mean, what did you guys? I mean, if you were to voice Lynch's Dune or Villeneuve.
I like the sound design. I think you're correct about the sound.
Yeah.
It's a very cool effect.
I go Villeneuve too.
I mean, I got a bunch of other small stuff. We've already talked about the worms. The Sardaukar, I mean, Lynch's Sardaukar, they're like got green gas. These guys kind of have this gray, dull suits. I don't know. I like the idea that Sardaukar are like special ops, which is a thing here, but it doesn't really go very far.
We're not seeing Sardaukar. We're mostly seeing Harkonnens in the second movie,
true.
right? When they've got the little like bubble. I
Yeah.
like their little bubble outfit.
Right, but we see Sardaukar at the end because they're protecting the Emperor.
They're protecting the Emperor.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I will say this is my opportunity to say one thing, which is I think Villeneuve he's good about like setting up the badassery of everything. So like you've got like, oh man, the Sardaukar are so badass. They like live on this weird fucked up planet and they're like the ultimate special ops forces. And the Harkonnens are such brutes. But Duncan Idaho's the greatest swordsman. Like this is all so cool. It's all set up. And it just kind of doesn't add up to very much. And the Fremen turn out to be like the most powerful, but like whatever, they kind of walk through the Sardaukar, or worm through them. So I do feel like that's to me why the second movie is a little bit of like a letdown.
But it's cool when they're underneath the sand with their breathing tubes.
That is cool. No,
I
the
did like
Fremen are
that.
super
I thought that was
cool.
cool.
I
Yeah.
like that.
And
I like the breathing tubes.
Yeah.
I thought it was cool.
All right. I don't know. I mean,
It's badass. It's an insane thing to do, to bury
look,
yourself in sand. It's insane.
Look, I'll go through the design stuff. The still suits are better in Lynch's Dune.
Yeah.
They're designed by Bob Ringwood, who would go on to design Michael Keaton's Batman suit.
Yeah.
The Gum Jabbar in Lynch's Dune is cooler. It's a thimble of death versus a little needle. I think the Gum Jabbar is cooler. Done. I think the Ornithopter in part 1 and 2 is cooler than Dune's.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, I know people push back on this. As a kid, I loved Lynch's shields.
Yeah, it looks
think they're
cool.
kind of fun. Yeah. I'm down with it.
Because in science fiction, force shields are always invisible until you see a moment of impact. Star Trek, or in Dune 1 and 2. I like this kind of weird, sort of like golden box thing, and it looks part janky, but sometimes it looks kind of cool. Like I kind of dig it. It looks, I love it. I was obsessed with it as a kid.
Yeah.
I also like his practicing little robot, like a steam.
Well, yeah, we don't get the weirding modules. I mean, that was something Lynch invented, so obviously we weren't going to get that. But there is something that is present that Lynch is building off of, which is Prana Bindu, which is the ability of the Bene Gesserit to basically control every muscle of their body independently of any other one, which allows them to like move really quickly, do cool jujitsu moves and stuff. Paul is trained in Prana Bindu, which is partly why he's a good swordsman. This is what Lynch took from that was like, okay, I'm going to turn this into this weirding module stuff, which is about sound and turning that into the physical force, which I think is all very cool because it's taking the spirit of what's in the book and turning it into something. And in this, there really isn't that. The thing that overcomes the Harkonnens in the end is they've got this cache of atomic weapons. Okay.
Yeah.
John, before we wrap up,
This has been a great podcast about Dune, the real Dune.
But before we wrap up,
Dune.
before we wrap up, we had a conversation. We've talked about Dune 1. We've talked about Willow with you, and in both, I think Tenet came up. And you've now seen Tenet in 70mm IMAX film, and you told me when we were talking you wanted to share your experience or some thoughts about.
I mean, Justin, I think that we should do a 72-part podcast about Tenet.
Yeah.
And I know there's a dialogue right now, both in interview and online and film Twitter, about Denny V and Christopher Nolan, and I have a lot of feelings about Nolan. And I as much as I dislike Oppenheimer, I'm an enormous Nolan fan, more so I think than a Denny V fan. But I went and saw for the fourth time Tenet on IMAX in 70mm, and it is so stupid and so beautiful, and it's so clear. It is experimental. Didn't Denny V recently got into some? I think it was misquoted, but there was a conversation online where he basically said that movies are visual and they're not about the dialogue.
Yes.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Right. I think it was a little taken out of context. I mean, he's both wrong, but also it's a visual medium, right? You can, and Tenet does that. The dialogue in that movie, in the opening first 15 minutes, remember, she goes, don't
try to understand it, feel it.
No, yeah, right. Which is a line from Rocky Horror, but no, she says, we're trying to prevent World War III. And John David Washington goes, nuclear holocaust? And she goes, yes, something worse. And there's like an hour later, they're like, he's like, this is so-and-so, this is beyond secret.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting in the theater and I'm being like, there's nothing beyond secret. There's like, it's a binary pretty much. It's a secret or it's not secret. There is no beyond. The dialogue is so nonsense, but as I'm being crushed by the visuals in IMAX, I'm freed.
Yes.
From my prejudices. I'm liberated for a need to understand what happens next. It washes over me, and it's a Bond film liberated from Bond, from pop. It was great fun. It's probably not my favorite Nolan still, but it is It's beautiful. The action's incredible, and it gives you a vibe. It gives you a feeling.
Yeah.
There's
I think the sound design too,
without knowing what the fuck. It's so stupid. I mean,
I
don't
love
need
it.
to. Don't need to. I mean, there's even parts people complain about the mixing, but like there's a part where
Who gives
you
a
know
shit?
you can't hear shit because the score is so
Who
loud,
cares?
and Neil's trying to make his plans. Who cares?
Just
I
fucking
tried
dig.
to
Just
I
just
tried to like
groove.
counsel my friends. This continues to not work, but one of my friends said, "I'm gonna watch. Should I watch Tenet or Dune?" Is what he actually said. Speaking of this too, and I said Tenet. But I was like, try to not get bogged down in the what's happening. Just watch hot dudes do cool shit. He did not.
I
follow.
would recommend Tenet over Dune, and and like John David Washington, the thing that Nolan does partly, it's not a complete homage to Bond, but he liberates the best parts of Bond.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
The travelogue, the men in suits, the car chase,
Yep.
the secret armies, right, fighting each other like in Thunderball. He kind of liberates these things and then transports them away from the colonial sort of like Bond sort of thing, and gives us. And the other thing I love too is that time travel movies are famous because you need to be able to deconstruct them. The best time travel movies, they're very well structured. And Tenet is like, fuck that. The future is angry, and they're bringing stuff back, and you're moving. It just no sense. But again, I was liberated. Like,
yeah, I'm glad. So glad.
maybe it's how I imagine it's how maybe like the Bolsheviks felt in like 1980. Like I felt liberated from the system, and I was free, and I was. I was like, woo!
And I think one of the things to this point, we're not going to dwell on this very much, but one of these things on this point is like, I think what you're seeing on the screen is stuff that we've never seen before. I mean, the stuff that he's doing that's part of that overwhelming kind of awe-inspiring, but I don't know what the fuck is happening, is like characters, one of whom is going forwards, one of them's going backwards, and they're fighting each other. We've never seen shit like that. We've never seen a car chase where one car is going backwards in time and the other car is going forwards in time. That shit, it is so cool.
There's a conversation about a golden age of sound editing and sound mixing, and I found the wall-to-wall sonic carpeting of the soundtrack of Tenet, devoid in many instances of melody, but just constant driving beat. To be wonderful, and hypnotic, and I didn't miss the normal hallmarks of a score.
Yes. I'm so glad to hear this, John, because this is the thing. I think it when I saw Tenet, it was a holy experience for me, but I really did feel like part of why it was a holy experience. I won't go into all of it, but part of it was that I felt like I was seeing something I'd never seen before and hearing stuff I'd never heard before in a movie. And I think that is a very magical thing to like, because we've seen a lot of stuff. What we're seeing in movies now is like remixes of stuff, and all the Marvel movies are just remixes of things. That's very fun a lot of times. But what I was saying in Tenet was stuff, the visual language was being innovated in front of my eyes. And I think that's really special.
But like innovated, and also old techniques were honored. Like Christopher Nolan is like, look, in this scene, I need an armored van, and I need 2 cars, and you know what else I need? I need a fire truck. Absolutely, definitely, I need a fire truck, and we need to like drive them all together.
Yes.
Yeah.
And our toddler was like, this is the greatest moment of my life.
There's nothing, when I see innovative, like it's that the visual, what you're seeing is never been sort of done in terms of the backwards forward stuff, but all it is just running a camera backwards. It's just, hey, act your scene out backwards, and then we'll like play it forwards, and sometimes we'll play it backwards. It's like really basic shit, but it's just, no one has like thought to like structure an entire movie around this and have like, I mean, the car chase where you have reverse Doppler effect and stuff is just, that stuff is so cool. It really does blow my mind. And it is this really, truly experiential thing. I'm very glad to hear you've had an experience with it.
Look, I'd love to have a conversation later at another time about how much Oppenheimer sucks. People are like, oh, it's Amadeus. I'm like, no, Amadeus is a masterpiece, and Oppenheimer is a director trying new things and failing. But Tenet, however, great stuff.
Okay, well, in 2 years we could talk about Dune Messiah, and then maybe you will have come around on Oppenheimer. John, tell us about your book Theater Kids, when it's coming out, how people can get it. What's the pitch for wanting to get a book about theater kids?
Theater Kids is a very sad, funny memoir about experimental theater. It is about in the year 2004, when I was not in a good place. It was about a friend that cast me in a 4-hour adaptation of William Faulkner's As They Lay Dying, performed in an abstract coffin that could only fit 13 people.
Whoa.
It was doomed to fail from the beginning. And the book is sort of about, it's partly a history of avant-garde theater in New York and America. It's partly a history of outsider art, but it's mostly about, making art and theater and telling stories for some reason other than money. So it's been a real labor of love. It's a very personal book, but if it's really for anyone that has ever made the mistake of creating art or a piece of media because they love it.
Yeah, that sounds great. And I will say, so for people listening, to get a flavor of how funny Theater Kids, I'm sure, will be, you should follow John DeVore on Twitter. You're at John DeVore. Is that right?
Yes, I am, Justin.
At John DeVore on Twitter, one of the funniest people on Twitter. Thank you very much for being here, John. This was a real pleasure.
It's a pleasure. I love talking to you too. Long live the fighters.
Long live the fighters. We are at CowsPod on Twitter. You can find us on the web at cowspod.com. And in 2 weeks, we'll be talking to my friend and philosophy professor colleague, Nat Hansen, about Red Dawn. So come back then. We'll see you guys then. Bye.